Welcome to this Getting Started with Drawing video tutorial. Now, it's about drawing, but this isn't about drawing fancy images. It's not about proper drawing. It's about scribbling and doodling using very, very simple tools. So that's all you'll need for this warm-up activity. You just need some paper and a pen, and it doesn't have to be a fancy pen at all. In fact, what I'm going to be using is this. This is one of my favorite pens, actually. It's just a Bic ballpoint pen. Of course, other products are available. And I like this pen because I know how to use it. And that's what this activity is all about. It's about getting familiar with the tools that you use. And when you do that, you get better at the tools that you use. So if you're using a pencil, that's absolutely fine. I've got my trusty U101 pencil ready to go here. And similarly, if you want to use your project journal or your sketchbook, again, I've got my U101 sketchbook here. I've always got this one with me. You could use that. Or if you want to use loose paper from the paper pack, the welcome pack from T190, then you can use that too. A top tip, if you are using loose paper though, is to make sure that you've got a couple of sheets if you're working on a hard surface. And that just gives you a different texture if you like to draw, and there's a little bit more give if you have two sheets, and you'll see why that matters in just a minute. So as I say, this is all about familiarization, getting used to your tools, because the more you learn how to use a tool, the more you need to, or the less you need to think about it, and the more I space it, if you like, in your head that you have for coming up with ideas. So grab your tool of choice and let's start with some scribbling. And quite literally, all I want you to do is start scribbling, okay? So just take your pen or pencil and start just making shapes on the page. I want you to think about kind of maybe going from left to right, okay? Just with a series of scribbles. You can scribble up and down and left to right. And as you do this, maybe try doing something a little bit heavier. Just lean a little bit heavier with the pen and see what that does to the texture. Because again, we're looking at the shape of this. We're looking at the texture that this is creating at the same time. And then just ease off the pressure a little bit and see how thin, how fine a line you can actually get. I don't know if you can notice as well, I've actually got my hand off the table as I'm doing this. I am not scribbling as if I'm writing, okay? Although my writing does look like scribbling, okay? I'm actually trying different ways of holding the pen, because it gives you different ways that you can actually use it. This pen, for example, I can use it right on the edge to get different colors, if you like, of black, or I can use it right on the top to get very, very fine lines. And the more you learn about the tool that you're using, the more you'll be able to try these different techniques. So there we go. I'm feeling a little bit warmed up. I've got my scribbles here. The other thing that you're doing as you're drawing, you're actually using the muscles and the nerves in your hand. Believe it or not, it is actually a type of thinking. So the next thing I'd like to do is to try to draw some short lines, okay? And again, this is to help control, if you like, how you're using the end of your pen. So I'm going to do some very quick vertical lines. Now notice what I'm doing. I'm drawing separate lines. I'm not drawing them continuously like that. I'm actually separating them. That's actually quite important. It helps you control the tip of your pen. Then next, I'm going to do some horizontal lines. I find this slightly harder. Don't make them too long, just keep them short just now. Later on in the module, I'll show you how to draw longer straight lines. And then I'm also going to change the weight, okay? I'm going to draw some very faint ones, and then I'm going to draw some very heavy ones. I must admit though, I'm actually probably better at drawing vertical lines. Most people have a preference as to whether they prefer drawing vertical or horizontal lines. I'm very, very right-handed, so I tend to prefer drawing vertical lines. Now, one of the things we can do with this, we can actually then create textures. So I'm actually just going to change the size, and I'm going to change the location of the vertical lines. I'm going to add some more on top of that, because this is actually a really cool technique for kind of drawing clouds, believe it or not. So there we go. I'm drawing a beautiful pastoral scene. There you go. You wouldn't think that was an architect, would you? There we go. You can have that one for nothing. Okay, next, we're going to just go back to what we did here, the different kind of line weights, if you like. It can be quite useful to just try doing different weights, if you like, of pen stroke, just to get a feel for what happens to the paper and what happens to the pen. That was one of the reasons why I'm suggesting that you actually do use a second sheet of paper. It means you can actually get a heavier line. If you're drawing onto a hard surface, it's quite hard to get a heavier line. And again, what this is doing is it's teaching you what you can do with the tool. The same thing applies if you're using a pencil. The heavier you press down with it, the heavier and darker the line, and the lighter, the thinner usually the line that you get from that. The next thing I'd like you to try is to create some patterns, some textures from this. So I'm basically going to use these kind of vertical lines and the horizontal lines. I'm going to use them in a kind of repeating fashion. I'm going to use 3 vertical ones and then 3 horizontal ones. And then I'm just going to repeat that down here. Now this can take a bit of getting used to. It can be quite hard to draw this at first, but what you're aiming to do is to get quite quick with these sorts of things. Oh, I got that wrong there. There we go. That's what we want. Because, believe it or not, this is actually a hatching pattern that you might use, for example, in architecture or in engineering. This is the hatching pattern that you would use to donate earth. So if you're cutting through the earth and you're drawing something above that, you would actually use this hatching pattern to indicate that that's what the material is. And again, we've developed these patterns as designers because they're very quick to do. They're what we would call procedural. There's a little sort of pattern to them, like 3 vertical, 3 horizontal, and they give you a very fast effect, okay? You can do it very quickly. Here's another very quick one you can do, and it's just by using circles. I'm going to draw some circles first just to get used to it. So these are anti-clockwise circles, so I'm going around that way, but I want you to do them in both directions because, again, most people are good at doing them in one direction. You've been taught how to use lettering. You've been taught how to write the letter O probably for many, many, many years, but it's also useful to be able to draw circles in the other direction, okay? So have a go at that. And once you've got back into the practice of drawing circles, let's create another texture, another hatch pattern. What I want to do is just create lots of different circles of different sizes, okay? And again, just like the scribble, I'm just going to kind of go from left to right here. And this can actually create quite an effective, yeah, this actually looks quite nice. I could imagine this actually working graphically, you know, as something like a banner. Yeah, maybe have a bit of white space either side. Yeah, so this isn't just about doodling for no reason. You can actually use these textures, these patterns, to help in your design thinking, to help in your design practice, okay? The final one I'm just going to touch on with the circles is just to draw a few spirals, okay? And again, you can draw them clockwise and anti-clockwise. And as well, a bit of a variation of this is what's called a scroll. And that's a kind of a spiral that goes one way and then moves over to the other way. You'll see how we can use these in the next video. Finally, I just want to show you another texture that you can use with a pen. And if you just create lots of dots like this with your pen or your pencil, usually when you're doing this and you're holding the pen or pencil in the normal way, you're actually creating lots of little dashes, okay? But another way to do this, another subtle way to control the point of it, is to actually hold your pen or pencil a bit more vertically. When you do that, just as it was with the different lines, you tend to not press as heavily and you get a bit more control over the point of your pen or your pencil. And this can give you actually really quite a nice effect. It's a stippling effect. That's what it's technically called. And if you put more dots in one area, you get a darker effect. And you can actually use this to good effect to create shading and shadows. You can actually draw using this, okay? In fact, entire artistic movements have been created out of this particular technique. But I'm hoping that this shows you that there's lots of different ways that you can use your pen, not just to write, and that are not that fancy. This isn't about drawing in a particular way. This is about just using your tool to create textures, to create patterns, to create shapes, to use the pen or the pencil in a different way. And that's going to be really useful, and we'll explore that in the next 2 video tutorials where you learn how to create diagrams and do a little bit more doodling. But until then, the more you do it, the more you practice, the more you'll learn about the tool, and the more you'll come up with ideas of how you can use it more creatively. So keep scribbling, and I'll show you how you can use your scribbles a little bit more seriously in the next video.